Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Maggie and today we're going to be doing my eyeshadow roulette update. So if you are not familiar with what I'm doing and what this eyeshadow roulette is, basically it's inspired by the Panels eyeshadows, which is a really fun project that a lot of people are doing, but I didn't want so much commitment. So basically what I'm doing is I'm rolling in 4 random shades each month to have as focus shades to try to use and get to know a little bit more. And it helps me use my palettes in ways that I maybe wouldn't have thought of, or reach for those shades, those types of things. So there's a lot of benefit, but I don't have to keep the eyeshadow in until I hit pan. I do have a use goal. I try to use each shadow at least 5 times in the month. But other than that, it's just kind of how I naturally would use the shade. So I'm going to be updating you on how my shadows from this past month went, how many times I used them. We're going to be rolling in new shades. We'll be talking about my pan percentage, and then I'm also going to do an eye look with all of the 4 shades that I pull in. So super exciting stuff. Let's just go ahead and dive in. Let's start talking about the 4 shades that I had pulled for March. So they're all ColourPop shades, and I actually put them in a little Z palette. So they are these 4 here. Ignore this one. I use this one as my contour shade, but these are the 4 shades right here, and I really enjoyed using them. So I'm going to pull up, I actually upgraded my tallying system. I know. I was using a Post-it note and just making tallies, but I got this app called Counter. And again, I have an iPhone, so I don't know if this is on Android or not, but I can put in everything I'm tracking, and then you just tap the number to increase the number of times you used it. So that's a lot easier for me, and I have like my project pan items in here, my project use it up items, so it helps me keep it a little bit organized. I do have them color coded, so I'll leave that link down below if you're interested. Okay, so I'm going to start with the shadow that I used the least, and we'll work up to the shadow that I used the most. So my least used shade is the shade Stiletto, which is this dark brown, and it does have some shimmer in it. So I typically would use a shade like this as a liner shade, and that is what I used it for. You can see hopefully where I have used it as a liner. You can see my brush mark in there. I use this 6 times in the month, so just kind of trying to make sure I hit that 5 mark. I think the reason for that is because I had a shade in my project pan, a dark brown, that I was using as a liner that I was trying to hit pan on. So I just want to use this as many times as I said I would and kind of go back to my project pan item. I don't mind pulling in shades that would conflict because this is like less important to me than my project pan shadows. But I use this 6 times. It is a nice liner shade. It does have a little bit of sparkle in it, but I find that that sparkle doesn't really show up when I wet my brush and I apply it with the flat liner brush that I use. I forgot to say, this comes from the Bare Necessities ColourPop palette. So I'll be popping this back in there in a minute. The next shade that I used the least was a shade called Spree, and this is also from the Bare Necessities palette from ColourPop. So this is what it looks like. It's a really pretty kind of like purpley pink with some glitter. I guess I should swatch these, shouldn't I? Duh, what am I doing? So let me get Stiletto first. So that's Stiletto there on my wrist. So it's like a very, very deep brown. And then let me get my makeup eraser here to wipe off my fingers. Stiletto does have a little bit of a shift to it. So let me pop it on. Here's it on my finger. And then on my hand, it does have a little bit of like a pinky purple shift to it, and it does have that sparkle. So I used it 8 times. I did enjoy using this on my lower lash line. I enjoyed using this on the outer like half of my eyelid to kind of add something special there. I tried to use it all over my lid, but I just felt like it was kind of too dark behind my glasses for all over the lid. So I ended up using it predominantly in those 2 ways. I really didn't take any photos of my makeup this month. Apologies, I will try to be better about that. But yeah, this is Spree from the ColourPop Bare Necessities palette, and I used it 8 times this month. Okay, the next shadow is a ColourPop, and this is from Wild Nothing palette, and this is the shade Alcove. So it's kind of this like orangey golden shade. I did use this 8 times as well, and I really enjoyed this one on my lid. This one is definitely softer and more of like a textured shimmer shade instead of like Spree where it's kind of like a matte with glitter in it. So the spree one, or I'm sorry, Alcove is right here on my hand, catching the light there from my window. I use this 8 times, like I said, and I pretty much use this as a lid shade. So the first half of my lid or all over the lid, it does come off kind of like as a peachy gold. I wouldn't say it shows like orange on your lid. So I did end up really liking this one, and I'm really happy I pulled this one in to get to know a little bit better. And then the last shadow I used 17 times, so quite a bit. And this is the shade Hustler, and this is from the Bare Necessities palette. So it's a matte, kind of like peachy shade. I would use this as my transition shade. So I would use this after I set my primer as kind of the first shade that I put in my crease. And that's why I was able to use it so much. So that's a swatch of it there. And on the back of my hand, it's pretty subtle, so you might have to like really look. It's at the top there. But it definitely is a good transition shade. It's a good shade to like blend back over my crease look or my crease shadows with. If I felt like something was not blending nicely or getting a little bit too dark, I could use this to kind of soften it up. So I did use this one 17 times, and I'm really happy that I had this because it paired really well, and I was able to pair it with most of the eye looks I did. So those are the 4 shades. I'm going to pop those back into the respective palettes, and then we'll talk about my pan percentage, if I brought in any shadows, what bonus pans I have, all that good stuff. Okay, so let's talk about the changes to my eyeshadow collection this past month. I did bring in one shadow that I want to share with you, and it's a cream shadow. So this is from e.l.f. It's the No Budge Shadow Stick, and I have the shade Magnetic Pull. I recently picked this up at Ulta, and I really like it. It's kind of like a taupey, purpley type shade. So it's right here. I have worn it a handful of times on my lid, kind of like smudged out into my crease. I've used it as a base shade, and I have decided that I am going to include this in my spreadsheet. This is the only cream shadow I have right now, but I am going to have it as an option to use and draw randomly. So I increased my total number of eyeshadows by 1. So I'm up to 81 total eyeshadows. And I did hit pan in 2 shades this month, so I want to share those with you. They're both from my Project Pan, which I'll link if you want to check it out. So the first one came on April 14th, and it's the shade Crystal Cove from my ColourPop Wild Nothing palette. So Crystal Cove is this first shade right here. And it's just kind of like a cream bone type shade. It does have some glitter in it, but I found that if I tapped off my brush, most of that glitter went away. It didn't really bother me either. This is the shade that I would use to set my primer. I'm kind of working through all of the shades like that in my collection to hit pan, and then I'll circle back around to start working on finishing them up. But that is one that I was able to hit. And then the second one I was able to hit happened on April 23rd. And it is this shade Dystopian from my Sultry palette from Anastasia. And that is this chocolate brown right here. So hopefully you can see that poking through. I did use this as a liner shade, and this is the one that, like I said, I would use stiletto that I pulled for this project that 6 times, and then I went back to this one because I really wanted to hit pan on it. So I was able to accomplish that. So I have 2 more pans in my collection. So I have a total of 8 eyeshadows with pan, and a total of 81 eyeshadows in my collection, which means that my pan percentage is 9.87%, which I'm blown away with. I never thought that I would get it like that high. So now I'm just curious to see how high can I get it this year, you know? So with all that being said, I'm going to clean off this hand, and then we're going to draw some new shades. Okay, so I'm going to pull up my Pretty Random app on my phone here so we can draw some shades. And I have in my spreadsheet row 2 through, let's see here, 82, because I have a header, you know, in my spreadsheet. Now, I do have a couple of rules when I would re-roll. So the first rule is the 4 shades that I just showed you that I just worked on in April, I don't want to re-roll in immediately into May. So I like to give those shades 1 month off, and then they'll be back in for June and fair game for me to roll again. The other thing is if I pull a shadow that is currently in my project pan, I will re-roll because I don't need a shadow to be in 2 projects. I'd rather have a different shadow to work on. So those are the rules. If I do pull like 2 blacks, I'll probably re-roll the second one, you know, to make sure that I'm getting something with more variety. But yeah, those are kind of the things that you should know about. So let's just go ahead and begin. I'm gonna prevent the re-rolls and we're gonna draw 4 shades. So we've got 70, we got 26, 61, and 33. So let me take a look at my spreadsheet to see how those work out. Okay, so 3 of those shades are good to go, but one of them I do need to re-roll because it's in my project pan. So we're gonna roll one more time here, and we get shade 82. Ooh, the last one in my spreadsheet. Okay, let me pull all of these shades and we'll swatch and talk about them, and then we're gonna put them on my eyes. Okay, so the shades, the 4 shades that I pulled came from 2 different palettes, and they are the ColourPop Bare Necessities palette and the Anastasia Sultry palette, which, you know, these are frequent flyers, but I also don't have, I only have 8 eyeshadow palettes, so, you know, that's just kind of how it works out. So the first shade that I pulled is from the Anastasia Sultry palette, and it's the shade Ember. So Ember is this kind of like dark, almost like olive brown type shade right here. This has been in my Eyeshadow Roulette before. It was in, not this past month, but the month before. So I have used it before and I did really enjoy it. So I'm happy it's back. It's kind of, like I said, an olive bronze brown. Really definitely like that one. The second shade I pulled also is from my Sultry palette, and the shade that I pulled is Slate, which is this matte gray, which I can confidently say I don't know how I'm gonna use. So that should be fun for me to figure out. It's just like a different color, you know, I don't use a gray matte shade every day in my looks, but I'm up for the challenge. So that's a swatch of it. It definitely is like a medium tone. So I'm thinking I could try it in the crease maybe, see how that goes, maybe on the lower lash line. I'm not really sure, but I think it's fun that I pulled this shade because that's definitely one, when I look into this palette, I'm like, ooh, yeah, I'm good. I don't need to use that one. But that's kind of the point, and what I'm looking for in this project is to help get me outside of that comfort zone. I'm thinking though that this would be good with Cyborg, which is the silver shade right next to it. It probably would be good with any of the shades in here. Really, I just have to be creative with how I'm going to use it. The next shade came from my Bare Necessities palette, and it is the shade Haute, which has been in here before as well, but it's been a few months. So Haute is a matte kind of orangey shade. Actually, I guess it has a little bit of sparkle to it, but barely any. Like, I would use this as a matte shade. So let's get a swatch of that here. So there's Haute, which definitely adds some warmth back in here. And then the last shade is actually the shade right below it from here, called Velveteen. So this is like a more traditional brown. I don't know that it's dark enough for me to use as a liner necessarily, but it's definitely good for like the crease and kind of building out, you know, the outside of your eye. So those are the 4 shades that I'm working with. 2 from the Sultry palette, 2 from the Bare Necessities palette. And you know, I'm excited, but I don't know how all 4 of these are gonna work in one eye look. So I definitely think I'm gonna need a additional lid shade. I'll need a highlight shade. So let me just go ahead and kind of get started on my makeup here, and we'll figure it out as we go. I'm not promising this is gonna be the prettiest look. So let me start by priming my eyes. I use the Milani eyeshadow primer and just get a little bit of this going. Okay. And then to set it, currently in my project pan, I'm working on the first shade from this e.l.f. quad. This is the Bite Size Quad in Cream and Sugar. So I'm going to be going in with this shade to set down my primer, and I'm going to be using my Sultry mirror to work on all this today. Okay, so I've set down my primer, and looking at this, I think I'm going to start with, I think, Slate, which is that gray in my crease, just very lightly. I'm not sure how that's gonna look, but we're gonna go for it. Okay, so it looks crazy, but I'm gonna switch brushes. This is more of like a natural haired brush that I think was gonna help me blend this more. Okay, so what I've learned is that Slate a little bit goes a long way. Like, it's very, very pigmented and very quick to build on itself. So I think what I'm gonna do to try to like tame this is go in with Velveteen, which is this brown next. And then I think I might add a little bit of Haute in there to add some warmth. But I'd like to get the brown in first because I think that's what's gonna add depth. And I don't know how dark I want to go, but I'm going to keep working with this brush because I'm finding that it blends the best onto this gray shade. I'm just going to grab a little bit of a white to help blend this out at the top. It's getting a little patchy. Okay, so I don't know if the brown is really noticeable on camera, but I can tell when I blended it that it just made the gray look a little less patchy and filled in some gaps. So I think I'm gonna add a little bit more brown out here, and then we'll go from there. Okay, so looking at my swatches here, I don't know that I want to add Haute, which is kind of that red, to my crease. I'm thinking I'm just gonna want that on the lower lash line, maybe to add a pop, but I think if I add it to the crease, it might get real muddy and dirty. So what I think I'm gonna do is just move on to my lid shade, which I kind of wanna try this Cyberg shade, which is the silver in the Sultry palette with Ember on the outer, like, half of my lid. So that's what I'm gonna do. Let me grab a brush here and we'll start with Cyborg. All right, and then I'm just gonna take the back side of this brush into Ember and put that on the like other half of my lid. Okay, so this is where we're at here. I'm actually kind of digging it more, getting that Cyborg shade in. I'm just gonna add a little bit more in the center here, but I'm starting to like this a little bit more. It's a little bit smokier than I normally do, but I'm kind of here for it. So I think next I'm gonna do liner, and I think I'm gonna use a black because I want it to be really crisp instead of a brown. So to do that, I like to use a flat liner brush, and I like to put a little bit of setting spray, and I get the brush wet here, and then I'm gonna dig into a black. I'm using the black from the ColourPop palette. And I just like to dab a little bit of the, most pigment off from the tip. And we're just gonna do like a thin line to start. Okay, so that's the first pass. Let me get a little bit more. Okay, so that's what I'm looking with liner now. Definitely pulls everything together, I think. So what I'm gonna do next is add that orange to my lower lash line, put some mascara on, and inner corner highlight, and I think we'll be done. So I'm gonna grab a different flat liner brush. This is not the one we just used wet. I'm gonna use Haute, which is the orangey shade here. And we're gonna put this on the lower lash line on the outer third, I think. So that is what we're looking like. I definitely think the orange is kind of the outlier here, but I'm glad I didn't put it in the crease work. I think, like I said, it just would have been too much. So let me put on some mascara here, and then we'll pop it in our corner, highlight it, and we'll see how it looks. Okay. For the inner corner shade, I'm going to use Pearl from my Sultry palette. It is a Project Pan shadow. So this is the completed look. I don't know. I don't hate it, but it's not something I would do on the regular. So I guess that accomplished the goal of Eyeshadow Roulette, right? To get outside my comfort zone, to use shades that I normally wouldn't. With glasses, it definitely looks a little bit darker just because of the shadow that glasses can cast against your eyes. But I don't hate it. It's definitely like a sultry look. It's definitely something that like reminds me of something that, you know, you'd wear out maybe like to the club or like out at night. Maybe not a daytime like work look for me, but I'm not mad at it. Let me know what you guys think. How would you use these 4 shades? They don't always have to be together. That's just kind of the fun part of this video, is making an eye look with all 4 of them. But how would you use these shades? What would you pair them with, independently or together? Let me know your thoughts. I'm definitely curious for any suggestions. So my goal is going to be to use each of these shades at least 5 times, and I will come back at the beginning of next month to tell you how it goes. I will try to take photos, but it is nice that I can tick off in my app that all 4 of these have at least 1 use now. So definitely a win there. And yeah, that's going to wrap up my Eyeshadow Roulette video. I hope you guys enjoyed. Thank you for taking some time out of your day to hang out with me. I really do appreciate it. And yeah, consider subscribing, give me a thumbs up, and I'll talk to you guys on my next one. Bye.